Part 3 of Chapter 28 and 29 in the McKay book. This is Mr. Oliver representing right here, giving you some real talk about the 20th century. Everybody knows about Hitler. Everybody's heard of Stalin. Most people haven't heard of Mussolini. Or even if you have, you might not know much about him. So basically, here's what you need to know. He's from Italy. His name is Benito Mussolini. He's part of the fascist party in Italy. Before he got into politics, he was a journalist. But ultimately, he gets bitten by the totalitarian bug and decides to go into, into being the ruler of a trouble-making group of malcontents after World War I. They feel as though Italy has not been given a fair shake. He is famous for saying things that are very controversial. Nowadays they would be. Back then, the whole idea of a social Darwinist view that, the strong survive was not that crazy. But it's more of the kind of thing you would hear before World War I. Him saying that the struggle between nations is not only good but essential is pretty crazy stuff. Take a look at what Mussolini says that fascism is. He says, primarily fascism, the more it considers and observes the future and the development of humanity quite apart from political considerations of the moment, believes neither in the possibility nor the utility of perpetual peace. This is crazy talk for an era that, as we're going to talk about in a later part, is very much geared on let's have peace, let's avoid ever having a nasty war again, blah, blah, blah. Then he says, it thus repudiates, gets rid of, or dislikes the doctrine of pacifism, born of a renunciation of the struggle and an act of cowardice in the face of sacrifice. War alone brings up to the highest tension all human energy and puts the stamp of nobility upon the peoples who have the courage to meet it. The fascist state is an embodied will to power and government. Interesting there. Do you see the will to power? Remember when we talked about Nietzsche? Everyone always compares Nietzsche to his influence on Hitler because of his whole, you need to be the Ubermensch, you need to seize the day and do what you must, ignore good and evil. But will to power is definitely something you could also tie back to Nietzsche, and you see it here with Mussolini. The idea of force in action, the growth of an empire, the expansion of the nation is for fascism an essential manifestation of vitality, and its opposite a sign of decadence. So you always got to be conquering people. You always got to be moving on. Peoples which are rising are always imperialist. Any renunciation is a sign of decay and of death. Never before has the nation stood more in need of authority, of direction, and of order. If every age has its own characteristic doctrine, there are 1,000 signs which point to fascism as the doctrine of our time. So clearly, this is a little bit dangerous, because this guy is full-on advocating, like, you need to be going and invading other people, because otherwise you are a sissy boy. And he's not the most enlightened thinker like that. By the way, did you notice this picture of him here giving a speech, bare-chested? It's pretty crazy to think that a leader would allow the press to take pictures of him with his shirt off, trying to prove that he's a manly man. You wouldn't really see that nowadays. Or would you, Mr. Putin? Anyway, Mussolini led an army, private army of his fascist followers. They were called the Black Shirts. Want to guess why? Yeah, they wore black shirts. That's why. And they marched on Rome in 1922 to demand that the king give them rights, make Mussolini the prime minister, and make and he in return will stop all the violence in the city. Now, never mind that Mussolini's black shirts were the ones causing most of the violence. He said he was going to end it, which he actually was able to do because he was causing it. So it was pretty easy to make it go away. It's like if I'm punching you and I'm like, look, I can make this stop. All you have to do is give me $20. And you give me $20 and I'm like, I've somehow figured out a way to keep you safe now. It's like, well, no, you just stopped hitting me, bro. That's that. The term fascism comes actually from the fasces, which is a Roman symbol of strength through unity. The little rods there are bundled together, and they're supposed to symbolize unity. It's a Roman symbol, if you might expect, because Mussolini was all about the glories of ancient Rome and bringing that back. As I said, his private troops are called the Black Shirts. The interesting thing about Mussolini is compared to all these other cats like Stalin and Hitler, Mussolini really is very mild. There's not a lot of opposition to him. He's extremely popular till about 1943 or so. And historians disagree about why. Some people think like, people just really liked Mussolini. Some people thought like, well, yeah, he had a secret police, and yeah, he censored the press, perhaps owing to his old journalistic background. Actually, he did a lot of that himself. It was very interesting like that. But it could also be that people just straight up liked Mussolini. They just were like, it's easier just to ignore some of the bad stuff. It wasn't like Stalin's Russia, where people are being arrested right and left. Mussolini had about 400 arrests over the course of his rule from 22 to 43. That's terrible. But relatively, that's not a lot compared to the other dictators. He sets out this goal that he is going to avenge Italian humiliations. What humiliations? Well, think back with me. Italy had won World War I, and yet, did it get a big reward for it? No. Italy had once been the most bad astronaut place in all of Europe. It was amazing. It was Roman dominance over the continent, pretty much. Now, Italy is that one country shaped like a boot or something. People don't realize how amazing they once were. So, Mussolini says, we're going to restore the greatness of Italy. We're going to make this thing here, which we all know because we know our geography. It's the, say it with me. Ready? 3, 2, 1. I didn't say it. Did you say it? Let's try it. 3, 2, 1. Mediterranean Sea. I bet you said it. The Mediterranean Sea. He said it's going to be like the Mediterranean Lake. More like that, son. And it's going to be like that because all of this stuff that I am outlining here is going to be like a Mediterranean lake for Italy. Mare Nostrum. Mussolini also had opinions on race. I said before, he didn't arrest a lot of people. He didn't execute a lot of people relatively either. But he's still a jerk. Mussolini says, when the city dies, the nation, deprived of its young life, the blood of new generations, is now made up of people who are old and degenerate and cannot defend itself against a younger people, which launch an attack on the now unguarded frontiers. He said, we got to stay moving. We got to stay vibrant. This is going to happen. They're going to get us. And it's not just going to happen to cities and nations, but on an infinitely greater scale. The whole white race, the Western race, can be submerged by other colored races, which are multiplying at a rate unknown in our race. Mussolini is a huge jerk and also a little bit racist. Just wanted to throw that in there. This here is a monument to Victor Emmanuel, the king of Italy under Mussolini. Some people nicknamed it Mussolini's typewriter because it looks ugly. Some people think it looks like a typewriter. I happened to have the fortune to be in Rome, try to get a picture of this, because just beyond this kind of modern-looking place is a view of the ancient Roman ruins. And I tried to get a picture of it, but these tourists blocked me. So in the back, you just got to imagine, you could stand there like this dude is here and see the Roman ruins, and then you could see the monument from the same thing. Italy, and especially Rome, are really interesting because you get a juxtaposition of the old and the new. Now, under Mussolini, art was important, but it wasn't art to empower the person. It wasn't art to make you feel better about yourself. It was to emphasize that you were small and the state was big. The individual had very little role in the modern state. The state was all. You are a flea. Look at this. This is a picture taken from the ground. Notice the Roman-looking statue. This is kind of a neoclassicist kind of motif. But also you've got this big, ugly building, but it makes you feel small as a person. Look how big it is. And look at this thing. I don't know if that's supposed to be Mussolini's face or anything, but like, you straight up, that's got regular people. Let's assume they're about 5'7", 8". Okay, average for the time. Maybe a little taller. And you got this. And it says, see. Yes. Mussolini, yes. Maybe that's why he was so popular, because people were like, oh yeah, Mussolini, yes. I hear good things about that guy. Mussolini was the guy that made the agreement that said the Pope gets his own country. The Vatican will be its own country. Many Catholics actually liked Mussolini because they felt like, you know what, he put the Pope back to a position of prominence. The Pope had been a prisoner in the Vatican, so to speak, since our unification of Italy back in 1870. So some Catholics really liked him. Plus, Mussolini hated communists, hated socialists, and hated anti-religious viewpoints, which a lot of people were like, well, us too. We also hate those things. So he brought stability in that way. Now I'm going to stop there and do Hitler as a separate part. So let's take a pause, time out, be back in a minute. Hi everybody, we're back to talk about Joseph Stalin in part 6 of my chapter 28 review. Joseph Stalin is an interesting fellow. He is in charge for longer than Hitler. Stalin takes over in the 20s and lasts all the way into the early 50s, 1953 to be exact. He's responsible for between 40 and 80 million people, depending on which historian you're listening to and what numbers they're using, they're counting in that. 40 to 80 million people dying. And the thing is, most people in the West are not aware of just how bad he is. So we're going to talk about that today. Keep in mind, this is an overview. There's so much. You could do 3 or 4 hours on Stalin alone. So just keep that in mind. His real name is not Joseph Stalin. His real name is Joseph Duga Vasily. He's the son of a shoemaker. His mom wanted him to be a priest. He is unsuccessful at those jobs he's successful at the job of being a shoemaker's son, but he does not end up being a priest. Instead, he goes on to be one of the world's biggest villains. I listed down his country as the USSR, which hopefully you remember stands for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. He is part of the Communist Party. Originally, he was a Bolshevik, a follower of Lenin's, but they changed the party name in the early 20s to Communist. He wasn't clicking for a second. Anyway, he was a revolutionary early on in life. Served some time in prison. Actually was sent to Siberia for working against the Tsar to undermine him. He was a friend of Lenin's. Keep in mind that Duke Vasily was his criminal name. It was his alias. You don't want to use your real name when you are working to overthrow the Tsar. So he chose one that makes him sound cool. He chose one that is Man of Steel. And frankly, that is pretty cool. He is not making a reference to Superman, by the way. Superman actually comes after Stalin. He would not have known. And plus, it's not a direct translation anyway. So just go with it. He believed that a communist society must have a powerful leader to remain strong. And I wanted to kind of throw this out there because he is not a true Marxist communist. A Marxist would believe the workers need to share all the power equally. Lenin had a special brand of communism for basically going a different direction with it, where he was going to need to be in power for a while, acting as the leader so that they could get everything on track. And of course, he relinquishes his power after he dies. There's a power struggle between Lenin and not Lenin, Lenin's dead. There's a power struggle between Leon Trotsky, the leader of the Red Army, and Stalin. Stalin was not Lenin's pick to lead the party. In fact, it was the other way. He wanted Trotsky to lead. Lenin was concerned, despite this fact. I'm going to go back for a second. Look at how happy they look in this picture. Look at Lenin's happy face. Look at Stalin looking all like, hey, what's up, guys? Lenin was suspicious of Stalin. He said, Stalin has amassed great power in his hands, and I am not sure that he always knows how to use that power responsibly. And essentially, he's given the Spider-Man speech. With great power comes great responsibility, and he don't think Stalin's got that responsibility. He thinks Stalin is kind of a lowlife. Stalin was, as I implied, a lower class guy. He was not an intellectual. Lenin liked that about him, actually. Lenin liked the fact that Stalin was like the kind of people that Lenin was trying to attract. Lenin knew that he could not connect on the same level that a guy like Stalin could. But he also felt that Stalin was sometimes a little unstable. For example, during the Russian Civil War, the Reds are fighting the Whites, of course. Stalin kills some of the wrong people. And they say, Stalin, you're going to get in trouble for this. He says, no. They said, what are you talking about? You killed those guys. He goes, no, death solves everything. No man, no problem. And if you understand that about Stalin, and combine that with the idea that Stalin is incredibly paranoid, those two things will guide you to being able to guess the decisions he makes for the rest of his life. I put some propaganda posters at the bottom here. On the right, you've got a Stalin picture showing, hey, look, families love Stalin. Look at that, I guess, little girl who's trying to climb literally into the wall. Over here, you have children adoring Stalin. Now, footnote, there is at the top here a caption that does not match down here as well. It looks like a slightly different font. That is because the original intent of this propaganda poster has been modified, and they've put in different language. Now it says, thank you, Stalin, for killing our parents. That would not have been the original version. I just wanted to point that out. I left it in as kind of a joke slash reference that most people probably wouldn't get, so that way my Russian students can feel knowledgeable. There is Stalin, young Stalin. There's Trotsky, and then in the middle is Lenin. They are not BFFs. When Lenin dies, they put him on display in Red Square, and you can go and see his body. You can still actually go see it today. He's been there for so long that now he's probably more plastic than man as they continually replace him and his skin that's rotting and whatnot with, I guess, plastic or whatever it is to make him look more human and less rotting. But you can do that. Stalin is responsible for planning the funeral. He tells Trotsky, oh, hey, bro, Why don't you come to the funeral, say some words? Trotsky's like, I will come to, how do you say, funeral. And Stalin's like, cool, bruh, hangs up. He told Trotsky the wrong day. So at the funeral, there's Stalin giving a speech about what a great guy that Lenin is, what a great hero to the communists. No Trotsky. Trotsky didn't even show up. And of course, I just said, that's not really Trotsky's fault. But do you think the average Russian was figuring that? No, they were like, wow, Trotsky is kind of a lowlife. Then Stalin starts to modify the historical record, essentially changing who is important in the Red Army. Trotsky was a war hero. In reality, he was brave, he was well-liked, etc. In Stalin's world, when he rewrites the history books, films, movies and stuff, he has himself portrayed by a taller, more handsome actor, and has Trotsky portrayed as a coward. And in those movies and in the history books, Stalin is the hero. That, plus Stalin playing up the fact that Trotsky is Jewish, so appealing to anti-Semitism in Russia, really hurts Trotsky quite a bit, ultimately driving him into exile. When he's in exile, he will end up going to Mexico as well as many other countries, speaking on the evils of Stalinism and how it's not true communism and Stalin's a psychopath and blah, blah, blah. Stalin sends assassins to have Trotsky killed. When Trotsky is killed, he is killed via ice pick. Not like a little tiny ice pick like you'd use to break up frozen water, but instead a kind of ice pick you'd use to climb buildings. And that right there is the ice pick. And then you look at this. Here is Leon Trotsky in the hospital. Massive head wound. It was went in so deep it was an inch into his skull. Pretty nasty stuff. Anyway, with Trotsky gone, Stalin is able to take over. Like I said, he photoshops before there is a Photoshop. He is removing people from photos that he does not want in the historical record anymore to be identified with. The famous examples are things like this. And what he would do is put these guys on trial and make them confess to crimes they didn't commit. This is if they were unlucky. If they were lucky, they got exiled. And he would force them to confess by either threatening their families. This guy legally made it a law to be related. Let me start that sentence again. He legally made it against the law to be related to a criminal. So you could put your family in danger as well if you broke the law. Or he could use it to threaten people and say basically, hey, confess in front of the world or your family gets it. They also use torture as well, and you actually can find many Stalinist-era confessions that have blood stains on them. They figured that out through forensic analysis. The symbol is the hammer and the sickle. The hammer representing the industrial worker, the sickle representing the agricultural worker. And despite the fact that the communists had hated the secret police of the Tsar, the Okhrana, were what they were called, you see the NKVD take over. And this is going to be rebranded shortly after Stalin as the KGB, basically their undercover thugs. Some Soviet propaganda here, I just threw it in here. It shows Vladimir Lenin sweeping away the monarchs, the capitalists, and the church. Remember, the communists are atheists, owing back to Karl Marx's famous axiom that religion is the opiate of the masses. In other words, it's a distraction, it's unnecessary. Here you have some socialist realist art. It shows the dominance of the worker. This one shows a little boy. Oh, he's on the streets of America. Look at that poor little boy. Over here, he looks so sad. He's so talented. You could tell because he's holding a violin. And then, in the Soviet Union, he is star. Because to each, according to their abilities, they decide who is going to be what. So he's going to end up there. So the goal of Stalin's social realist art is to emphasize the power of the worker. Now, you might think that's a little hypocritical. Stalin himself is keeping the worker down. Stalin is living the life where he can have whoever he wants arrested. He can order the executions of anyone, massive amounts of arrests all over the Soviet Union. But the worker is made into a heroic figure in the art. So it's kind of an irony, but that was always the goal, to emphasize the power of the proletariat. The military goals were to protect the Soviet Union from Western aggression. He gets burned by Hitler, as we'll talk about in chapter 29. But essentially, he makes a deal with Hitler. Hitler breaks that deal, and Stalin is under siege. They almost lose. The Russians, the Soviet Union, actually loses more troops than any other army in World War II. And as a result, the Russians and the other Soviet republics are very wary about the West. And Stalin is really going to wall them off, so to speak. That was a little foreshadowing for chapter 30. He doesn't build the Berlin Wall. That's actually Khrushchev in 1961. But it was a convenient pun. He didn't get along well with religion, as I kind of intimated a second ago. This is an image of workers throwing away Jesus along with common trash. It's meant to be kind of an incendiary kind of message. They're making it very clear that they do not want God here. Some churches are even turned into museums of atheism. Last but certainly not least, I just wanted to talk about at the end of this some common characteristics of totalitarian states. The imprisoning and elimination of enemies, mass rallies, stability at the expense of freedom, and the idea constantly reiterated that the state is greater than the individual. All of these dictators deserve more time, quite frankly. I could do a lot more, but this is just meant to be a basic introduction. If I have time, I'll record one of these that goes into more detail soon. Okay, see you in part 1 of chapter 29. Bye-bye.